Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome to the latest edition of The Fortress of Rock, July the 7th, 2023, episode 99. Yes, we're 1 week away from the milestone, the 100th episode of The Fortress of Rock. Once we get to the back end of this episode, the back end of this show, we will discuss. I'm not going to go too crazy, too nutsy cuckoo, but we'll have something fun planned. By the time we get to wrap it up, segment 4, I will let you know. I will have formulated, I will have figured out what we're going to do, in addition to the normal stuff. The news of the world, breakdown, reviews of new music, traveling back in time for I Want to Go Back. We'll do all that cool stuff, but we'll throw something special in as well. But for now, I did mention News of the World, our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen. As always, leading off the Fortress of Rock. We mentioned there were rumors, rumblings about something going on with Motley Crue and Dogs of War. Was that a new song? Was it the name of the new album they're working on? Well, it turns out it might be more than just one thing. On June 30th over in London, the Dogs of War played a gig. Yes, that was, of course, Motley Crue with new guitarist John Five in tow. Played a show in front of about 450 fans, tearing through a short but sweet selection of Crue classics. But they are not discounting the fact that Dogs of War could indeed be the name of a new song or the new album. But for now, it was simply a pseudonym for Motley Crue as they played a surprise gig. Not so surprising, but a surprise gig in London in front of 450 lucky fans. Well, they were lucky if Vince Neil actually sang and it wasn't pre-recorded. Oh! Sorry. I think I read that on a Mick Mars post on social media. We're going to save the big news of the week once we get here to the end of News of the World. So let's discuss the other little tidbits and nuggets we've got for you. I am not a fan of Disturbed. I have made no bones about it. I am not a fan of the newer bands with the face tattoos and oh, you want a cup of oatmeal now type of singing. But I have to give Disturbed frontman Dave Draiman a hell of a lot of credit here because he has sided with me against that evil piece of garbage Roger Waters. On June the 28th, in front of a crowd in Tel Aviv. And of course, Dave Draiman is of Jewish descent. He went on a tirade, tearing Roger Waters apart. Of course, the fortress is clean because I want the kids, your kids, the next generation of rock and roll fans to be able to listen to this without going overboard. So, I cannot get into detail on what Dave Draiman said other than there were multiple F-bombs dropped. But in essence, he, like me, sees through all this phoniness where Roger Waters keeps saying, well, it's all about what I created with The Wall, and I'm really not anti-Semitic. Flying a pig with the Star of David on it. I'm really not anti. Shut up. You are. You're a hateful bigot. And it still bums me out, saddens me to this day and beyond that people in the rock and roll community back you up for your hate speech and your attitudes towards the Jewish people. So good for Disturbed frontman Dave Draiman. Come on into the Fortress of Rock. We'll drop the drawbridge just for you, my man. Let's go off the beaten path a little bit. We'll talk a little bit of pop music and we'll talk a little bit of country music. First up, Britney Spears. If you haven't heard by now, seems like the only way old Britney can get into the headlines since her music career is faded and gone. Still, very, very pretty woman. Mentally, who knows? Tried to approach superstar to be, I guess, unless he breaks his leg in game one and can't play ever again. Number 1 overall NBA draft pick for the San Antonio Spurs, Victor Wembanyama. Tried to approach him, supposedly just wanted to say hi. Security guy didn't know what was going on as she approached from behind, tapping Victor on the shoulder. The security guy pushes Britney's hand off of Victor Wembanyama, and Britney proceeds to hit herself in the face. Comical, yes. Sad, yes. Especially when the initial reports were that Britney was accusing the security guard of hitting her. No, it turns out, as the police looked at security camera footage, Britney, oops, you did it again. This time hitting yourself. Maybe with a little help from the security guard, but still, there is not going to be any kind of assault charge levied against the security guard. So you've got a star to be, possibly, maybe, again, health always plays into this. And you've got a fading star whose paths cross for a ridiculously absurd moment. Now, the country news I've got, you have to bear with me here. You guys know, if you've been listening to The Fortress for the last almost 2 years now, I'm a big fan of certain things that maybe aren't all that popular anymore. Disco, K-Tel records from the 70s, CDs because everybody now wants vinyl, and the Billboard music charts. Because when I was growing up, I was a fanatic when it came to listening to Casey Kasem's American Top 40, of course, based on the Hot 100 Billboard singles charts. And I kept following the Hot 100 for decades after that. Now, I have since regained my sanity, and I have not paid attention to the Billboard Hot 100 in a long, long, long time because it got to the point where it was useless. Number one, the Billboard website was it was cumbersome, overwrought with ads and graphics, and it was just slow to load and just a nightmare to get through. But then the more important part of it was the fact that there were no rock songs, not just in the top 40, but even to the point where there were no rock songs in the Hot 100 as a whole. But I have to give credit to Morgan Wallen and Luke Combs, two massive country superstars. Number 1 and number 2 on the Hot 100 here recently. The first time two country stars have topped the Hot 100, you have to go back to 1981. Eddie Rabbitt was number 1. I do believe that was I Love a Rainy Night. And Dolly Parton was number 2 with 9 to 5. Number 1, Eddie Rabbitt, awesome, very underrated, one of the few country stars, past, present, and future, that I really, really like. And of course, Dolly Parton, we will talk more about Dolly later on. But congrats to Morgan Wallen and Luke Combs. I'm not a huge fan of modern country music, but at least it's better than the pop hip-hop crap that usually dominates Billboard's Hot 100. Couple of moments of silence, passings in the world of rock and roll. Number 1, one of the greatest music videos of all time. Another thing that I love, that I look back on fondly, that is no longer relevant in my world, is MTV. Back in the 80s, it was America's radio station, as I like to call it. It brought everybody together from coast to coast. We were all watching the same videos, the same VJs, and back then, the same great music. Of course, with the visual aspect. Centerfold by the J. Geils Band propelled Peter Wolf and Company to superstardom. Of course, the album Freeze Frame, great, great album. Centerfold, awesome song, awesome video. The director of J. Geils Band's Centerfold video, Paul Justman, passed away recently. And then I see a lot of media outlets glomming on to this one. And by no means am I trying to diminish the passing of George Tickner. But by the way, some big-time media outlets are glomming on to this story and saying, oh, Journey member dies. Yes, George Tickner was the initial guitarist, along with Neil Schon, in Journey. He was on the first album, contributed to the next few albums, I believe, but in no way, shape, or form. You see, like, Fox News they're acting like Neil Schon himself died with the coverage they're giving George Tickner. Let's settle down a bit, kids. We will, of course, give George Tickner his proper due here on the Fortress of Rock, but let's not go too far. When you're naming past and present members of Journey, I think George Tickner doesn't even fall in the top 10. Maybe close. All right, now, I kind of teased it. If you guys haven't heard by now, the Eagles have announced they are going to start their farewell tour here in the next couple months. Steely Dan will be the opening act. I don't know, based on the details, if that's going to last through the entire farewell tour. I will give the Eagles credit for this, and I have bashed the Eagles time and time again. Number 1, Don Henley is a greedy piece of garbage. The Eagles were the first band, the first big-time rock band to start gouging their fans when it came to concert ticket prices. Like Bruce Springsteen now, of course, doing it more recently, but the Eagles, decades ago, were the first ones to start charging triple digits for nosebleed seats, for lawn seats, for their shows. But I'll give them credit. They're being upfront with this, just like Kiss. They're saying, we're stretching this bad boy out as long as we possibly can. The farewell tour, again, I don't know how long Steely Dan will follow through on this as the opening act. Starting here, early fall of 2023, we'll go into 2025. That's why they're calling it the long goodbye. So again, at least they're being honest and upfront about that. 13 dates have been announced so far. Obviously, many, many, many more to come. I have an early shot in mid-fall of seeing them in Indianapolis. I am going to do my best to get there because I have never seen the Eagles. One of the few great bands of all time I have never seen in concert. So I do want to make an effort to finally see them. I had a couple opportunities. I actually had a ticket to see them at one point. Glenn Frey fell ill. I believe he had to have stomach or appendix surgery. This is going back to the early 90s. And they had to reschedule the show, and I couldn't make the rescheduled show. Got a refund on the ticket. And then here more recently, came down to a choice between Bon Jovi and the Eagles. Couldn't really afford both. Eagles were more expensive again. Much more expensive. So opted for Bon Jovi. I rather would have paid the extra $50 or $60 to see the Eagles because Bon Jovi was abysmal. One of the worst concerts, if not the worst concert I have ever seen in my life. So I've always said, in my personal experience, I've had issues with the Counting Crows. Not with their performances. First time I went to see the Counting Crows, I realized I needed glasses because I couldn't see the stage. And we had pretty good seats. Second time I saw the Counting Crows, my daughter was very young, wearing earplugs, wanted to see the Counting Crows, still loves the Counting Crows to this day. But it was one of her first concerts. There was some miscommunication. I thought she needed to go to the bathroom. She thought I said we can go, even though there were still 4 or 5 songs left, including A Long December, my favorite Counting Crows song, and one of the greatest songs of all time. She threw away her earplugs, started heading for the exit, and I said, "What are you doing?" And of course, she was so young, not really, really young, early teens. Couldn't really take her back in, still getting her concert ears, as I call them. So we left, and I could hear as we were walking out to the parking lot the wonderful, wonderful Adam Duritz starting in with A Long December. And I walked all the rest of the way to the car with my head hung low. But I digress. Eagles farewell tour. Hopefully you will get to see them and you won't have to take out a second mortgage on your house to do it. And then finally, to wrap up News of the World, a little bit more on farewell tours, a little bit of foreshadowing for what's to come in a couple weeks here on the Fortress of Rock. As we tape here on July the 7th, last night, July the 6th, Foreigner began their farewell tour. And in a couple weeks, specifically 2 weeks from tonight, so we're looking at 3 episodes from now, I will have a review of Foreigner on their farewell tour from outside of Indianapolis, Indiana. Of course, opening act, Loverboy. And that is going to do it for the first segment. News of the World here on July the 7th, 2023 is done. But we're not even in the second leg of this yet. We're just curving around the first turn, heading for the second turn, and eventually the backstretch. But next up, of course, is Breakdown, our tribute to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, new music reviews, new album from Aaron Jones, new music from Dolly Parton, Mammoth WVH, Rick Springfield, and Paul Rodgers. So we've got a lot to digest, a lot to get into. Quick promo break. 60 seconds from now, I will be right back. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Fortress of Rock podcast with me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Of course, that was segment 1, The News of the World, our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen, where we look back at the past week in rock and roll and all the news and all the controversies that you deserve to know about. Next up is the heart of the show, the meat and potatoes, Breakdown, where we are going to review all the new songs, all the new albums, all the new concert tours, the shows that I've seen personally. Stay tuned for that. Of course, we're now available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Hang out, kids. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fortress of Rock here, July the 7th, 2023. I, of course, am the Maestro. You are who you are, and it is time for new music. It is Breakdown. A lot to get into this week. A mixed bag, to say the least, in terms of styles, genres, and we can say that even when it comes to our album review, within the one album. Our featured album review this week is the second album from Aaron Jones, Chronicles of the Kid. Now, I've delved into the first album. I can't say it's one of my repeat listens. There were some things about it I really, really liked, some things I didn't. Friends of mine recommended Aaron Jones to me as they saw him open for, I believe it was Shinedown, a couple years ago. But I was impressed enough with the guitar playing. He's a great guitarist. Some of his songwriting ideas were intriguing. So I figured, let's give the second album a shot. Chronicles of the Kid. 10 songs from Aaron Jones. Let us get into it, as of course we always try to do. We do our very best to go track by track. And like so many albums, here recently especially, it seems like the first 2 or 3 songs are fantastic. The problem is, again, can we sustain the momentum that the initial couple songs set? Can we propel ourselves positively through the rest of the album with good songwriting, with great guitar work? Most of the time recently, it has been an emphatic no, with the exception, of course, of Queens of the Stone Age recently. But there have been a lot of disappointing albums here in 2023. I hate to say it. I thought 2023 held a lot of promise in terms of new music releases. We've still got a couple on the horizon for August that I am very, very optimistic about. The Hives, and of course Mammoth WVH, who we'll talk about in a few minutes here. But Aaron Jones falls into the same trap we've seen with a lot of other artists, a lot of other performers. Starts off very, very strong, and I get it. You look at the album, you look at the sequence of songs, you want to put your best foot forward. You want to draw the audience in. You don't want to start off an album with a stinker, which still amazes me how Matchbox 20 on their new album put one of the worst songs on there as the lead-off track. So at least Aaron Jones has got this right. Now, we've already talked about two of the songs. Track 2, Blood in the Water, and track 3, The Title. Now, track 1 is Straw Man. Straw Man is basically a straight-ahead rocker. Very effective, very tight. Excellent song. Then, of course, we move into Blood in the Water, a little more somber in tone, talking about the death of a mother, the death of a father. It, of course, does pick up the pace. Again, a very effective song. Blood in the Water was the leadoff single from Chronicles of the Kid. So we're 2 for 2 right now. We're doing pretty good. 2 for 2. And then we get The Title. Now, The Title walks a tightrope. And we'll talk about another song on this album later on that walks the same tightrope. But we start to pull back from the straight-on hard rock, blues rock of the first 2 tracks. But we don't completely abandon it yet. The Title is kind of bragging, kind of trash talking. As Aaron Jones says, I'm coming for the title, talking, singing like he's some kind of a rock and roll boxer. The rock and roll heavyweight champion of the world coming for the title. Now, I will say that this particular instance works. The Title's a great song because it stays edgy. It stays pretty much rock and roll. But now, after we get through the first 3 songs where the album is sounding pretty dang good, it all falls apart. How many times have I said that this year? When I'm reviewing an album after the first 2 or 3 songs, it all falls apart after that. Because Aaron Jones, just like on his first album, doesn't know who he wants to be musically. He is all over the map. I will say it again. He is a great guitarist. But once we get past the first 3 songs, we start to see the weaknesses in the songwriting and in his vocals. Other Side, track 4. Little bit more pop than rock and some very, very lazy songwriting, in my opinion. Yeah, we get it. We've heard it time and time again. I can't take it with me to the other side. We know, we all know when you die, you can't take it, anything with you to the other side. Not really the deepest lyrics in rock history. Note sarcasm. And it's just kind of a little wussy pop song to me. And that's the thing. After the standout, rocking, edgy trio that we started the album with, then we get this little wussy, popish Other Side. Then he tries to redeem himself on track 5 with My America, which kind of sounds to me like generic Living Colour. Living Colour can put out an incendiary, fantastic, topical song about social issues, politics, government. That's why I love them. That's why they're one of my favorite bands of all time. Aaron Jones kind of embarrasses himself trying to be like Living Colour here. With, again, very, very bad songwriting. Okay, we hate, we lie, I cry for my America. And of course, he has to throw the can't breathe line in there. We all know that refers back to, what was it, George Floyd? We get it. Low-hanging fruit for a song that's supposed to be edgy and political. Just comes off as kind of lame. Then we get arguably the worst song on the album, Living for the Fall. Now, I will say this, the guitar work on this one probably redeems it, but it is really boring otherwise. And then we get to tracks 7 and 8, where I really, really have a problem with Aaron Jones. And again, the schizophrenic nature of his albums and his music. Some people say, well, he can do anything. He can play rock and roll, he can play hip hop, he can even get close to rap. That tells me he doesn't have focus. He doesn't know who he wants to be. He's not going to appeal to everybody and anybody. He's going to appeal to nobody, and he's not going to succeed with this kind of strategy. He needs to focus on, let's say, 2 musical styles. Because again, going back to track 6, Living for the Fall, great guitar work, but it's otherwise a blah, mid-tempo ballad. Then you get to track 7, Filthy, which I won't say it goes to rap, but it has that feel to it. They don't call me dope, they call me filthy. And he talks about sexual conquests. It just seems so out of place. But then maybe it doesn't, because he had moments like this on his first album. And then it gets even worse with track 8, Get High. Because he just decides that instead of actually writing a good song, he'll take a couple of mediocre lines and punctuate them with MFer over and over. He must say MFer at least 15 to 20 times, if not more, in this song. That to me, sorry, I'm good with cursing. I try to restrain myself, and it's very hard each and every week here on the Fortress to not curse. A well-placed curse word, nothing better in the world. To just do it over and over and over again for the sake of shock value, which is almost what I'm getting from the song Get High. My parents told me once, yes, I did learn a couple things from my parents. Cursing is the lack of intelligence, because you're too lazy to come up with a better word. So you drop an F-bomb, you drop an S-bomb. If that's the case, then Get High could be one of the most ignorant songs of all time. And I, fan of bloody horror movies, over-the-top action movies, will say this song is just offensive to me. Not only because of the excessive cursing, but the laziness in the songwriting again. I keep going back to that. He's got potential. Aaron Jones has got potential. It's not shining through. He won't let it shine through because he feels he's got to fall back for some reason on music like this. Then track 9 is The Sky is Crying. It is not a cover song. It is an original composition. Maybe the cover would have been better. You've got a little bit of dramatic, I don't know if it's strings or just keyboards in the background. The Sky is Crying is a little bit better than the last 3 or 4 songs. I'm only happy when the sky is crying. Okay, we get it. You've juxtaposed happy and crying, happy and sad. Again, rudimentary. Songwriting 101. Not all that groundbreaking. And then we end everything with track 10 on 2 Feet I Stand. By this point, I have been so numbed at the ineptitude of the last 6 songs that I don't care anymore. I really don't care anymore. And on 2 Feet I Stand doesn't do much to end things on a positive or high note. So definitely not recommending Chronicles of the Kid. Aaron Jones' disappointing album is not the worst thing I've ever heard. Don't take it the wrong way. Don't take my criticisms the wrong way. I care to the point where I'm going deeper and looking more into the flaws with Aaron Jones, because there is promise and potential in there, but somebody has got to pull him out of this schizophrenic malaise he's in and get him to focus on one style. I don't even want to go 2 anymore, because that would be giving him too much rope. One style. You want to rock? You rock. Play that guitar like you have been over the first 2 albums. It's great. Face-melting stuff at times. Or if you want to play more hip-hop and rap, go for it. But this jumping from ballad to hard rock to hip-hop to pop, it's just, you're not going to get any kind of a fan base. You're not going to create any kind of a consistent fan base that's going to stick with you when you do that. So there you go. Time better spent than listening to Chronicles of the Kid by Aaron Jones. All right, 4 songs for you this week. Let's start off with Rick Springfield. I'm going to save the title track from his upcoming new album, Automatic, for next week. But we will discuss She Walks with the Angels. So maybe you thought I was a little harsh on Aaron Jones. Well, I have basically the same criticisms of Rick Springfield's She Walks with the Angels, except instead of being spread across an entire album, a stylistic potpourri gone wrong, Rick Springfield manages to compress it all into one song. Oh my God, this song is almost headache-inducing with all the different shifts and changes and tempos and nuances and little technical touches that Springfield puts into this. It's too much. It's way too much. It's overproduced. At one point, he even rips off Steve Vai's guitar whistle from David Lee Roth's Yankee Rose. I mean, it's just everything in the kitchen sink here. And just like Aaron Jones, somebody needs to tell Rick Springfield, okay, you're in the back half of your career. There's nostalgia involved. People still want to see you. I'd still want to see you. I thought Rick Springfield was vastly underrated, despite his success. But this is not winning me over. So I'm very cautious going into next week, reviewing the second song, the title track, Automatic. So far I've told you, stay away from Aaron Jones. Now I'm telling you, stay away from She Walks with the Angels by Rick Springfield. Let me give you a couple that are at least somewhat positive. Yes, somewhat. Qualified. Let's say qualified recommendations here. First up, Paul Rodgers of Bad Company is back solo for the first time in a long, long time. I believe 2 decades since he put out a solo album. Living It Up, his new song. I'm not impressed with it lyrically. Again, I seem to be really locked in on songwriting this week for some reason. But it's basically kind of a love letter to both America and England. But I'll say musically, it's very well done. The band behind him is very solid. They don't waste time. They've trimmed the fat. It's a tight song. Kind of reminiscent in a way. I can hear echoes of Rock Steady in there. I would recommend checking out Paul Rodgers' Living It Up. Not the greatest song you're going to hear this year. The way things are going might be the greatest song you've heard in the last month, though. But pretty good. Paul Rodgers, Living It Up, pretty good. Now we move on, of course, to personal stuff. A band that I am emotionally, a performer that I am emotionally invested in. Mammoth, WVH, of course, Wolfgang Van Halen. After the phenomenal, nearly flawless debut album, getting mixed signals here for Mammoth 2, coming in August. Loved the lead-off track. Another Celebration at the End of the World was fantastic. Heard it, I was grinning from ear to ear, saying, here we go. No sophomore slump. This is the next great American rock band. But hold the phone. Then the second single comes out, Like a Pastime. Very underwhelming. Easily the worst song. Again, high standards. I have high standards for Mammoth. But Like a Pastime, to me, was easily the most underwhelming song that Mammoth WVH has put out to date. So at least take some comfort in the fact that I will tell you that the third single, Take a Bow, is better. How much better? I have listened to the song at least half a dozen times. By now, it should be growing on me a little bit more instead of, it's okay. Now, the one part of it that will blow you away, you have to look at this song overall, and then you have to look at the guitar solo. Because Wolfgang Van Halen plays the guitar solo on his father's original Frankenstein through the original Marshall amps that Eddie Van Halen used. And you can hear it's eerie. It is spooky how much that guitar solo on Take a Bow sounds like Wolfgang is channeling his father. You can hear it. So the price of admission for that phenomenal guitar solo is the rest of Take a Bow, which is nearly 7 minutes long. I'll take it. I'll pay that price. So out of everything this week, yes, we still have one more song to go. Out of everything this week, the album, all these singles, I will say, even though it's still not where I think Mammoth should be at this point, Take a Bow is the best you've got this week. Especially that guitar solo. My God. Finally, hate to end on a sour note, but again, I feel like I have got to try with this Dolly Parton situation. I bashed on her for weeks and weeks and months about the whole Rock and Roll Hall of Fame thing. And rightfully so. She shouldn't be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. She's a great musician in terms of personality. She's an icon. She's not worthy of being in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But give her credit, I guess. She said if she got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, she would put out a rock and roll album. And of course, we've talked about the fact that later on this year, we will get her rock and roll album. Some new songs, a lot of cover songs. Have to review, it feels like an obligation. Have to review her new song with Rob Halford of Judas Priest. That song is called Bygones. It is not the worst thing I've ever heard in my life, but it's uncomfortable to listen to. It just doesn't feel right. It feels awkward. It feels a little forced. There's really nothing outstanding about this song. I will say this about the songwriting again. In terms of the songwriting, if this song had been given to another band, another performer, I don't think the song itself is badly written. I think, unfortunately, it's just mismatched in terms of the duets. I just don't like it because Dolly Parton and Rob Halford, it's like oil and water, just doesn't go together. And you can feel it all the way through this song. Again, very uncomfortable, very awkward listen. And this is kind of what I was expecting with this rock album with all the guest stars. So again, I cannot recommend this. Stay away from this. It's borderline cringe inducing. But what is not cringe inducing is Doc Brown and the Rock and Roll DeLorean. He's got it revving up, getting it up to 1.21 gigawatts, the flux capacitor, as we prepare to go back in time. July the 7th. What happened on this day in terms of music history, significant music releases, birthdays? Doc Brown and I have got you covered after a quick promo break. It is time for I Want to Go Back. All right, now that we've looked at the current state of music in our breakdown segment, it is time to climb into the DeLorean and travel back in time to look back at moments in rock and roll history, birthdays, deaths, anniversaries of song and album releases. It is time for I Want to Go Back, our tribute to Eddie Money. Stay tuned. And as always, we're on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, anywhere where you listen to your favorite podcasts. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fortress of Rock here. Friday night, July the 7th, 2023, episode 99. Next week is the Big 100. Gonna have some fun. We will talk about what we've got in store for the 100th episode of the Fortress of Rock in segment 4. As always, wrap it up, where we look ahead to future episodes. But now is not the time for the future. Now is the time for the past. I've got my compadre, Doc Brown, sitting next to me. He is at the wheel. of the rock and roll DeLorean. He's got it fired up to 1.21 gigawatts. We are in the rock and roll time stream. It is time for I Want to Go Back, our tribute to the late, great Eddie Money, as we look at anniversaries of classic album releases, birthdays, classic moments in rock history. But yes, I have to drag down the proceedings for about a minute. Got to do some bitness. Number one, I want to acknowledge the sources for a lot of the stories and a lot of the things we talk about in segment 1 and segment 3 here. And I Want to Go Back. 3 main sources: ultimateclassicrock.com, thisdayinmusic.com, and of course, the mighty Van Halen News Desk. We also like to tell you you've got options. Many places where you can find the Fortress of Rock. And those include Spotify, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, Amazon Music, Audible, and iHeartRadio. Unfortunately, leaving us in about 6-7 weeks, Stitcher. You got till August the 29th. If you love Stitcher, we love Stitcher. Sad to see Stitcher go, but they are shutting down August the 29th. Then, of course, don't forget to check out our Facebook page. Each and every weekend, we have a lot of fun stuff for you. About the time that this episode will post Friday night, it'll be time for the Weekend Rock Project. We give you a topic, a theme, and you have to give us in return your favorite rock songs of all time that fit into that particular word, topic, or theme. Don't know yet. Pushing it to the last minute. Don't know what the Weekend Rock Project will be. You'll just have to check out the Facebook page to find out. Then, of course, every Sunday is New Music Sunday. We post a video off of YouTube. Might be a lyric video, might be a full-fledged, full production video of a new song, most likely one we've talked about here on the Fortress of Rock. Last week was the lyric video for Take a Bow. Of course, we just reviewed Mammoth WVH Take a Bow in the last segment. Not sure again yet what's coming up this Sunday. Flying by the seat of my pants. But I'll come up with something, and it will be something good. It always is. Let's get into it. Doc Brown is dropping us out of the rock and roll time stream in 1962 as we start off with birthdays here on July the 7th. 7/7/62. July the 7th, 1962. The bass player for the Spin Doctors. Yes, they have been abused over the years, but they had a couple massive catchy hits. Didn't really have any kind of long, sustained success, but hey, they did better than most of us. Mark White, bassist for the Spin Doctors. His birthday is today, born in 1962. Another band that has suffered through abuse, albeit of a different type. And I've told you guys my affinity for disco. Born on this day, July the 7th in 1950, David Hodo of the Village People. Again, similar to the Spin Doctors in a way, in that they had a couple big hits. I would say the Village People, of course, had a much more impactful presence on the charts. Their songs were a little bit more timeless, have lasted, have made it through the years in a little bit better shape than the Spin Doctors. But, of course, you've got the issues with the Village People appealing to the gay and lesbian community in the disco era, and that caused a lot of consternation, a lot of trouble for people, especially uptight people back in the late 70s who didn't know how to deal with that kind of sexual openness. Now, today, it's a whole different issue altogether. The pendulum is swung all the way to the other side, where now that faction, in my opinion, has become hateful and has become too violent and too aggressive when they start talking about children and taking your children, coming for your children. Kind of makes me wish for the older days of the Village People where it was a little more innocent. The stuffy older people back in the 70s, again, didn't know how to deal with a sexual revolution of that type. And maybe if we handled it a little better, we wouldn't be stuck in the almost opposite mess that we're in now. July the 7th, 1945, Jim Rodford. The Rodford Files. No, just kidding. It's not James Garner. It's Jim Rodford. Who? Maestro. Who is Jim Rodford? Actually, a very significant part of rock and roll history. Played bass for Argent. Massive hit. Hold Your Head Up. And then went on to join the Kinks in their commercial heyday from the late 70s through the mid 90s. So Jim Rodford actually played bass for not one, but two very significant bands in rock and roll history. Of course, the Kinks are significant, but Argent as well. Another name that's going to leave you with a puzzled glance. July the 7th, 1944, Warren Entner. Again, Maestro, where are you getting these people from? Where are you getting these names from? Who are these people? Well, Warren Entner played for, again, a very underrated group in the late 60s. Had a lot of massive hits, the Grassroots. Now, when I was doing a little bit of research on Warren Entner, and I'm not trying to take away from his birthday, happy birthday to Warren Entner. A little known fact, maybe it's not little known, but I think you'd be surprised at how many people would not know this. This is something you can throw at somebody at a party sometime. We've still got a couple full months of summer left, cookouts, barbecues. Little trivia for you. Now, the Grassroots, of course, as I mentioned, fairly significant band coming out of the 60s. Do you know who played guitar at one point in time during a very popular period for the Grassroots? That would be one Creed Bratton. Why does that name sound more familiar? Because Creed Bratton, of course, starred as quote-unquote himself on the mega popular NBC show The Office. Yes, Creed Bratton, that Creed Bratton played for a time, played guitar for the Grassroots. I'm sure some of you out there know that, but I'm giving you something to kind of trick some people, to give some people pause at your neighborhood block party, wherever you might get together with people, and say, hey, I'm a rock and roll god. You know what I know that you don't know? Let's talk about the grassroots. You're welcome. Then finally, the biggest birthday here in this group on July the 7th, born in 1940, the most insignificant Beatle. Sorry. Sorry, Ringo. Sorry, Ringo. Yes, on this day in 1940, Richard Starkey, a.k.a. Ringo Starr, was born. And I'm sorry, he is, in the end, the least significant Beatle. Sorry, he is. Have you ever listened to Octopus's Garden? Ugh. All right, let's move on to anniversaries. On this day, July the 7th, 2009, at the Staples Center in Los Angeles, the memorial service for Michael Jackson, the King of Pop, was held. You can feel how you want to feel about him. I've always said I can separate the art from the artist. Sometimes it's tougher than others. I think Kevin Spacey is a fantastic actor, but obviously in real life he is a complete and total scumbag. You could say the same thing in terms of music about Michael Jackson. Speaking of hypocrites and scumbags, let's talk about July the 7th, 2007. This barely registered with me. It was a blip on my radar. The Live Earth series of concerts were held across the world on this day in 2007, all shepherded by one Al Gore. Al Gore, of course, claiming to care about nothing but the environment. We've got to save the planet. He was making bold proclamations about the planet would die on this day and that would pass. And he goes, no, 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 no. It'll now be this day and that day would pass. Oh, no, no, no. All the while at his little compound, I believe in Tennessee, using more energy than pretty much almost any major facility in the state. Of course, jetting around from speech to speech, getting paid tens of thousands of dollars to talk about our carbon footprint. And don't get me started on his wife, who could be worse. Of course, Tipper Gore, in terms of music, the PMRC calling Dee Snider and Judas Priest out on the carpet and Ozzy Osbourne for their quote-unquote devil music. Disgusting pair of people, in my humble opinion. July the 7th, 2006, before Roger Waters and his ego took over Pink Floyd, you had Syd Barrett. Syd Barrett now had issues, tried to launch a solo career after he left Pink Floyd, I believe after only one album. On this day in 2006, the original frontman for Pink Floyd, Syd Barrett, passed away. July the 7th, 1989. Now, I've told you guys, all you new hipsters out there, paying $30 for vinyl. I've seen it all. I've gone through 8 tracks. I've gone through cassettes. I've gone through vinyl. I've gone through CDs. I've gone through digital MP3s, MP4s, and now back to vinyl again. I'm not part of the new vinyl wave. To me, Vinyl is a pain in the butt. You got to drop the needle on just the... Oh, but the sound is not better. The sound is not better. Give me a CD any day of the week. On this day in 1989, July the 7th, CDs outsold vinyl for the very first time. July the 7th, 1984, what a day in the world of music, especially on the charts. We talked earlier in segment 1 about a historical moment on the Billboard Hot 100, which I don't follow anymore, but I used to religiously, back when it mattered, back when it was a much more accurate measuring stick for music popularity. July the 7th, 1984, your number one album in the country, Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen, which of course we just talked about here recently because Dancing in the Dark, the first single off that album, peaked at number 2. Overall, 7 top 10 singles off of Born in the USA, only matched by Michael Jackson and Janet Jackson, I do believe. But we're not done with the charts yet in 1984 on this day. The number one single, When Doves Cry by Prince. He was already a fairly big star after 1999. This propelled him into the stratosphere. Born in the USA, number one album. When Doves Cry, number one single. Extremely significant day on the charts in music history. July the 7th, 1980. Unfortunately, the last concert for Led Zeppelin featuring John Bonham on drums. Of course, we know that later on John Bonham died. This concert was in West Berlin. Again, July the 7th, 1980, the final Led Zeppelin performance with all 4 original members involved. We talked about marriage here recently. We talked about Cher and Greg Allman. Let's talk about some more marriage. Love and marriage, love and marriage. July the 7th, 1971. I'm going to butcher names here, so deal with it. Bjorn Ulvaeus and Agnetha Fältskog, of course, of ABBA, get married on this day in 1971. And, of course, we know that the other pair in ABBA also got married at some point. I bet that made for some real fun recording sessions. Ooh, boy. And then finally, we talked about Ringo Starr's birthday earlier, so we will revisit the Beatles here one more time. As we finish up, I want to go back, heading back home to the garage at the Fortress of Rock, our final moment in rock history to discuss. July the 7th, 1969. The Beatles record George Harrison's fantastic song, Here Comes the Sun. Did you know? I have to admit, I claim ignorance on this, and it's very rare when it comes to rock and roll that I will proclaim ignorance. Hell, I'll even say that I kind of sort of knew about Creed Bratton when we were talking about the Grassroots. I did not know that the Beatles recorded Here Comes the Sun without John Lennon. And it wasn't because of a dispute about creative control or the direction of the band or money. John Lennon had been involved in a car crash and was recuperating from said car crash, could not attend the recording sessions for Here Comes the Sun. All right, thanks as always. Segment 3 is done. Always a blast to go back in time with Doc Brown and with you to look back at all these significant special moments in rock history. But as I mentioned, another special and significant moment is next week's episode, our 100th episode of the Fortress of Rock. So hang out through a quick promo break. I'll be right back, and we will discuss what's coming up in episode 100 as we wrap it up, kids. I'll be right back. Well, we hope you enjoyed our trip back in time, looking back at the anniversaries, the classic moments in rock and roll history. But of course, the DeLorean works both ways. So now we have to move forward. The last segment here, as always, on the Fortress of Rock with me, the Maestro Kevin Crane. Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. It's all about the future. What's coming out here in the next month or two? What songs? What albums? What concert tours? That's why we call it Wrap It Up. Thanks to the fabulous Thunderbirds. Thanks to you for hanging out. Here comes our final segment. All right, that's going to about do it for the Fortress of Rock here on July the 7th, 2023. But of course, we are not quite done yet. It's time for Wrap It Up, where we discuss what's coming up in the weeks and months ahead here on the Fortress of Rock. Now, good news and bad news. Good news, what I like to call the Festival of Concerts is just a few weeks away. I've mentioned this, I've alluded to it. Basically, from late July through late September, we will have a concert review, if not one, two a week, over that span of about 2 months. So that is going to take up a lot of our breakdown segment starting at the end of July. I've already talked about it in segment 1. First up will be Foreigner and Loverboy. We will have a review of that for you on our July 28th episode. And then after that, each and every week. Each and every week. And trust me, I've looked. It's each and every week. Now, that's part of the good news. Let's do some bad news. The bad news is July is looking very, very barren in terms of new music. We've got, again, as we mentioned earlier, Mammoth WVH, The Hives coming out in August, but July, right now, not looking great for new music. So we're kind of going to be scraping the bottom of the barrel until we get to the Festival of Concerts. So we're still looking at listening to some of the new Pretenders music. Still looking to catch up on Peter Gabriel. He's got another new song out, So Much. I mean, the guy has released, it seems like over half of I.O. already. I can't understand why the album isn't out by now, since he's putting basically almost the entire album out. Piece by piece. New moon by new moon. We mentioned Rick Springfield, Automatic, the title track off his upcoming new album. We'll review that for you. And this is how desperate we are for new music. I might actually review more Dolly Parton. I might actually review this cover song, her duet with Ann Wilson of Magic Man, the classic Heart song. I might have to sink to that level, because unless I start seeing some great new music coming out, I might have to start looking around, poking around on Spotify, trying to find some different bands to listen to. I actually did try, little sidebar here. I actually did try, because I'm a big fan of Southern rock. I love the Allman Brothers, Lynyrd Skynyrd, Molly Hatchet, and kind of sort of in that vein. I'd heard a lot of good things about Government Mule, featuring Warren Haynes. Listened to a little bit of their new album. I believe it's called Peace Like a River. Don't quote me on that. Didn't do much for me. Got through about 2 or 3 songs. Gonna have to pull back on that, reevaluate. Speaking of which, what could be in the future is finally revisiting Smashing Pumpkins, Autumn. Yes, I hated the first disc, the first act of the 3-act rock opera. But I know there's at least a couple good songs that I've already heard in there somewhere, lurking on those other 2 discs, in those other 2 acts. So that might be the option that we're looking at here on the Fortress of Rock to get us through July. We might go back and revisit Smashing Pumpkins' Autumn. Can't be any worse than listening to more Dolly Parton, right? Ugh. Finally, I've been talking about it for weeks. Next week, July the 14th, next Friday, is the 100th episode of The Fortress of Rock. Now, I alluded to this earlier. We're still going to do news of the week, news of the world. We're still going to do I Want to Go Back for July the 14th. We're still going to review some of these iffy songs in breakdown. But what I'm going to do, and I'm going to kind of split things up among the 4 segments that you're accustomed to every week on the Fortress of Rock. What I'm going to do is I'm going to revisit something I did along with my daughter 6 years ago. I dug this up. She and I were goofing around, talking about music. And she kind of knows my favorite album, my favorite songs of all time. And she knows my favorite artists. Of course, you guys do as well. Van Halen has been number 1 for decades upon decades and probably will never move off that number 1 spot. But she said, you listen to so much music and you listen to so many different performers and so many different bands. What about your top 40 rock performers of all time? And I, of course, had to say, well, I'll take it further. I'll do you one better. Let's expand it. Let's go 50. And it just became a game of one-upsmanship, where I eventually, and this again was back in 2017, I came up with 90. My top 90 rock and roll performers. And a couple weekends ago, thinking about this 100th episode, found that old email, printed out the list that I'd sent her. I wish I'd put it in a spreadsheet, but I did it as a Word document. So I'm going to have a harder time reorganizing it, because I'm going to move some performers and bands up, some down, but I'm going to try to make it 100. I am going to try to make it an even 100. And no, I'm not going to break down every single act in my top 100, but I'm going to just go ahead and share that list with you. We'll probably do 25 in each segment. Again, I'm only going to stop once or twice for comments, for asides, for little stories. But just play along at home. Pause the podcast if you need to write down my list. Maybe I'll even post it on the Facebook page. See how yours would compare to mine. Now, there is a band in my top 10. I will tell you this. I won't tell you who it is, but I will tell you this. There is a band in my top 10. I think I left the first 6 or 7 alone. I think those performers are set in stone. They're not moving. But I think number 7 or 8, I can't remember which, is dropping out of the top 10. So there is going to be some intrigue, at least for me personally. You guys are going to hear it for the first time. You're not going to know who I've moved up, who I've moved down. I will probably tell you, though. So hopefully we can have some fun with this next Friday night. The top 100 rock and roll acts of all time. And I'm sure you will disagree with me vehemently on a lot of my rankings. I can tell you right now, you are going to hate me for where I rank the Beatles. And you're probably not going to like me very much for where I put Led Zeppelin. But again, it's personal. It's the bands that I like, the bands that I love. I'm not putting together a generic Rolling Stone type list of the consensus top 100 of all time. It's my top 100. You should have a top 100. That's why music is great. It's personal. It touches everybody in a different way. So it's going to be my top 100. There will be a lot of shocks because, again, it is not conforming to the norm, to the accepted standard. But it's time to let you guys go. Have a great weekend, hopefully. This is a short work week you've just had, so you're right back into time off again, hopefully. Those of you who have to work, I'm sorry. Hopefully the Fortress of Rock gives you a little bit of peace and comfort. We all got to go back to work for a full week next week, though. So we're back to being slaves to the grind. All right. Everybody out there, you love the one you're with. I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Thanks again, as always, for hanging out with me on your Friday night for a little while. I will talk to you in 7 days. Take care.